Inspirational Creatives, episode 191. Welcome to Inspirational Creatives. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. Join me every Friday as I chat with successful artists, producers, and creative entrepreneurs who share powerful stories and strategies. They can help you to create the life that you want. Listen each week as these inspirational creatives show you how to take your creativity to the next level. You'll learn how to create a sustainable business that inspires others and gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. Thanks for listening. Make sure you sign up at inspirationalcreatives.com to get free exclusive bonus material. And now, on with the show. My guest today is somebody who has a gift for recognizing talent. She's a mum who has a fascinating story that involves having experienced physical, mental and emotional abuse, as well as many turning points in her life, which included divorce, her own successful recruitment agency and a corporate career. Today, she has transformed her own world and is now living as an intuitive life and career strategist who helps people to reconnect with their authentic selves, creating a life and a sense of purpose that is aligned with who they truly are. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today, Lorraine Whyte. Lorraine, welcome.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you. And thank you for that great introduction.
You're very welcome. With that in mind, what would you like to add to that introduction to give people a sense of who you are in the world today?
Okay. Well, I am a life and career strategist and I work with women over the age of 30 who are ready really to embrace their uniqueness as a strategy for career satisfaction and business success.
I love that. So what, in essence, has to happen to begin to start finding our own uniqueness?
Really, I would say the first thing that I advise people to do is to connect with their soul. What I mean by that is really connecting with who they are at the core, looking back at their life and really finding the wisdom from all of the lessons that they've learned. And meditation as a practice really to really get in touch with that. And I have a meditation that I have developed that's on iTunes at the moment called the Energy Remedy, which I give to clients to help them to get in touch with themselves. It's kind of reprogramming their energy to help them get in touch with their truth. And the whole meditation is about truth. And that is a really good starting point. And that's how I started my journey.
I'd love to get into your journey and I'd love to come back to the Energy Remedy and some of the stuff that you're doing there. Why do you think that we lose touch with ourselves in the first instance?
Well, we're in a world where if you're not following everyone else, then you are seen as an outcast. And a lot of people don't really want to be seen as that or to feel that they don't belong, to feel that they really haven't got any kind of support, because that's another thing as well. People won't step out of the ordinary because they feel that they're not supported. And that's why I think, from what I've seen from clients, and also I think people have like fears. So there's a lot of fears of what others think, but also of uncertainty as well, and not feeling that, not knowing that if they step out, what that's going to mean for them, which is a big thing.
Yeah, so this is kind of, in some sense, it's a case of daring to be different.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing there, which is fascinating to me, is that people feel unsupported, which is why they're not stepping out to be them true selves. Perhaps because they're too scared to ask for help. Is that right?
Yes. Because if I kind of use my journey as an example, so it's like I stepped out, I did my own business and then I went into this kind of work. But many people around me may have thought that I was crazy. It's like you've had this corporate job, you've had this success. Why are you now stepping out to be some kind of life strategist or whatever it is that you call yourself now? Yeah. It's crazy type thing. And because you feel that other people are calling you crazy, etc., you think, oh, well, everyone else is going to think like that. But it's not until you actually start exploring, as I had to do, what I wanted to do when I started to find support and other people who are doing the same thing. But it's like, it's daring to be different, but also daring to open up that Pandora's box, if you like, to go and explore.
And what's the reality of that journey been like for you? I mean, I can definitely relate with some of what you're saying there in terms of I think one of the big fears that we have when we want to make a life transition that feels authentic to us is this fear that we're going to leave people that we love behind, or we're going to lose a connection with them. How's that been for you?
Wow, I went through a divorce. As I started on this journey, I started to really feel empowered because I was in a very dysfunctional situation where my marriage was concerned, and I really was living a lie. And so I had to find the courage to leave. And then after that, I kind of, everyone else, like my family, for instance, saw me as somebody they didn't recognize me basically, because I was now somebody who was quite a strong person, quite independent, which they didn't really see. And I think that frightened them a bit, because I actually lost some family members in that process as well, who were not really willing to accept the person that I had become. I had to battle with that for quite a while before kind of just saying to myself, okay, Lorraine, this is who I am. And if anyone around me doesn't accept that, then I can't really be around them for too long because it holds you back, and they don't do it intentionally. They don't realize they're doing it a lot of the time, but it's like you have to look after yourself in order to feel that you can be yourself.
It's a real risk, isn't it? But we have to do that, though, I also sense there's so many people in the world that don't do it.
Yeah, and it's a real detriment to their self-esteem, to their self-confidence, because you're living a lie effectively.
Absolutely. So in terms of your own journey, what have been some of the benefits of living a truly authentic life?
There are lots. For me, I think it's been self-esteem, definitely, self-confidence, feeling free to do whatever you want in terms of, as long as it's obviously not harming anyone else, but feeling free to be yourself. And to, like, I'm very creative, for instance, so I can have ideas and I can share them with people, like-minded people, and not feel ostracized for doing that. So it's freedom. It's true creative freedom is what it's given me.
Amazing. We spoke a moment ago about this fear of losing human connection, but in terms of human connection, what's that transition, that transformation been like for you?
I've had to decide to love from a distance. I've chosen to be who I am and just love from a distance. And I see them when I want to see them, but I don't. How do I put it? It's like it's kind of protecting myself, I suppose, because it's like I found that being in that environment for too long, it really brings you down. And so I've had to really monitor that and become aware of, okay, so when I'm around certain people, how do I feel type thing, just manage that. So I'm not saying to completely cut them off, but just really love from a distance.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so those people that appear less in your life right now, when you go through that transformation, are those connections replaced by other beings and other people?
Wow, yes, definitely. It's like you are clearing the way for new energy to come in. And this is why it's so important that you do that, because just think, if you are saying to the universe that it's okay to be around people who don't honor who you are as the soul of you, let's say, then it's like you're saying to the universe, it's okay. And so the universe will continue to send people around you, put people around you who don't honor who you are. But it's like when you step out and you say, well, no, actually, this is not what I want. This is not who I am. Then you're clearing space for new people, like-minded people to come in and to be in your space.
Yeah, I love that. So that can give people that are listening to this some kind of hope. It could give our listener some kind of hope in terms of, like, look, if you're going to go through a transformation such as yours, and as part of that transformation, you need to let go of relationships which are not serving you, you will then find relationships and new people in your life that will serve you.
I think as well that when you go through that process, it makes you more self-aware and more intuitive, so that when people do come into your life who do honor you, it's like you recognize them. You recognize them immediately almost, it's like, yeah, and you feel like you're home.
Yeah, I love that expression. You recognize them because you feel at home. They feel like they're a perfect fit for you in that sense. So let's talk a little bit more about your story, and talk to me a little bit about what a life and career strategist is, or rather what an intuitive life and career strategist is, and how you got there, how you became that person.
Well, I see life as a journey. And I think that many of us will walk down the paths or walk down the roads that other people have walked down, or the path that's already been trodden on. And I see my position as my job, let's say, as being the person who helps other people to understand themselves, understand their soul, so that they can then choose the path that they want to go down, or even create a new path, create a new road. And in terms of, like, if I was to compare myself, because a lot of people say, so what's the difference between a life strategist and a life coach? So someone would come to me before they then went on to a life coach, because I see my work as being work that helps the person to understand their inner selves. And then working with a life coach will help them to understand and refine their outer selves. Okay. So I came to this realization. I came onto this path at the beginning of my journey when I started to explore life coaching, and I had some coaching sessions, and I just found that like I had one coach, for instance, who said to me, okay, you know what you want, just go off and do it. You know, and I wasn't ready at that time to do that, because I had so much fears and worries and concerns going on for me that I wasn't ready. But I also felt that it wasn't counseling that I needed either. I just needed to understand myself. And so I actually went on that journey myself. And the way that I work now is literally a reflection of my journey and the process that I took in order to understand myself, so that I could then find my own way, type thing. Because I think that when we understand ourselves, we can never be lost. Do you know? It's like with coaching, if you're just going to be doing coaching alone, you are, you know, like you hear about people who have had a coach for like 2 or 3 years, and, you know, that isn't how it should be. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't need a coach at all, but you shouldn't be relying on someone for 2 or 3 years, you know. And that's how my work is different, because I empower the person to really listen to themselves and understand their soul.
So I've been looking at your new website, and it's fascinating reading your story on there. You've clearly had many varied life experiences. What's been the reality of some of those very low times like for you? And how has that helped you to find the path that you're on right now?
The low times for me has been the loneliness, perhaps. Well, it was. And because with this path, when you step out and decide to follow your soul, to follow your heart, you have to be strong and courageous, and to know that you're okay. It can be a lonely path, because you have decided to love from a distance, as I put it. You have to go through that lonely stage in order to then move on to the other stage where you've met your soul family, let's say. That's how I see it. It's like you have to take that journey on your own from one shore to the other. And then on the other side, you've got your soul family waiting for you, waving, saying, here we are, that you've got to make that journey. So for me, it was that part of the journey was probably the hardest, the most challenging.
And what specifically was it about that was the most challenging?
It's not really having anyone around who understood what I was going through, because it's a transition. So you're literally moving from one phase of your life to the other. And yeah, you're not going to necessarily have people around you who get you. I suppose trying to get used to my own company, because that's what I'd never kind of experienced that before. I'd always been with somebody or had friends, or, you know, but that period was the most empowering, because I got to know myself. And it's like when you've got no choice but to be with yourself, you have to get to know yourself and get to like yourself, get to accept yourself. And then that's what brings you to the next phase.
Wow, that's fascinating. So how did you cope during that time? Because I imagine this isn't an overnight thing. So there's a sense of, I imagine in the beginning, a sense of loneliness and disconnection, because you suddenly realize that you're going through this transformation, or rather you need to go through this transformation, and not anybody is really going to get you necessarily going through this. So how did you manage? What did you seek during that time in those early experiences that helped you through?
Well, it all came back to, what did I enjoy doing? What was it that inspired me? What was it that made me happy? I had to really get in touch with that. And I did a lot of personal development work on myself. I did the Landmark Forum. It's a personal development weekend whereby you literally, it's like a boot camp and you literally work on yourself with like hundreds of other people from Friday to Sunday. And all of your issues come up. You have to look at all of the choices that you've made and the consequences, and just embrace those consequences, all of the relationships that you have in your life, your friendships and so forth. It really breaks you down and then builds you back up, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So I did that. And I also read lots, because my thing is I've always loved books. From a child. I used to love libraries. And so books were another big comfort for me. I read The Road Less Traveled was one which was really impactful on my life at that time. And even like films and stuff like The Lord of the Rings, I just really wanted to understand my journey. And that's, for me, that's my unique thing in terms of how I feel better, is to understand. So I just had to understand what was going on. So whether it was books, films like The Lord of the Rings, that which is a big one for me as well, that really helped me to understand what was going on in my own life.
Amazing. I'm fascinated to learn, how did The Lord of the Rings help you to understand what was going on in your own life?
Okay, so The Lord of the Rings is about finding a ring. Okay, it's like finding that thing that's going to make everything better and to remove the darkness from your life type thing. But it's on that journey that you discover so much about yourself that you realize in the end that the ring obviously helped to remove the darkness. But by the time you actually found the ring, you were a lot stronger than you were when you started off. Because if they'd given you that ring at the beginning, then you probably wouldn't have been able to have the power to overcome the darkness.
Yes. I love that. Yeah, I've never thought of The Lord of the Rings in that way before, in terms of personal transformation.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so talk to me about how this has then led to being an intuitive. Where did that all come into it? And what exactly is one? Because I understand sort of life and career strategy, and I understand intuition, but I'm really fascinated to know how they blend together. And also because I'm well aware that you come from a qualified background, in the sense that you've worked with these systems and processes and models that are well recognized in the corporate space for helping people to figure out logically what their career is.
Yes.
But I like this idea of being more intuitive about figuring out what the right life is for us and how that all works. So can you tell me a little bit more about that journey and what you've learned, what you can help people with, and how you help them with all of that?
So through my journey, I discovered that I had always been intuitive, because I used to be a recruiter and I used to have my own recruitment business. But throughout that time, I was always interviewing people and just instinctively knowing whether they'd be able to do the job or not. And it wasn't always based on the CV, because a lot of the time I'd receive a CV, and the CV, or resume as some people would call it, and I'd receive that and it wouldn't be the same person. What they put on the CV or the resume was not the same as the person that they are, if that makes sense. So when they used to come in for the interview, I'd look at the CV and it was like two different people. That instinctively I would know that I needed to invite that person for an interview. You know, it was like, oh, it's not on the CV, but I just know that this person might be able to do the job type thing. And so I was a very good recruiter, but I didn't realize that I was using my intuition. I didn't value that intuitive ability, let's say. It wasn't until I went on this journey of self-discovery that I started to nurture my intuitive ability, when I really sat down and pulled everything apart in terms of the job that I used to do and the things that I most enjoyed and why. And this is what I do with people. And I found that I have this intuitive thing. I've come to realize that intuition is the voice of the soul. By me calling myself an intuitive, it's like I'm able to connect with the voice of the soul. And that's the best way to put it. And when I work with people, it's a soul to soul experience. So I'm connecting with my soul, but I'm also connecting with the other person's soul and honoring the other person's soul. It's at that depth that I work.
You mentioned that one of your practices is using meditation, but I'm fascinated to learn how you use that ability. I mean, how do you connect with somebody's soul in that sense to help them find clarity?
When I work with somebody, so I will use meditation as a vehicle to help them to connect with their soul. And I do this very spontaneously. So when I work with somebody, they will have an issue that we have to understand and clear. I will get them to go into meditation, and I do it. It's different for every single person. It's just something that I just do. And I will take them through a journey to help them to connect with what's in their subconscious, what's coming up for them, what is really going on. And then we clear it. I just do it through meditation. So I've helped people who perhaps have fears about uncertainty. That's one thing that comes up a lot of the time. So again, I'll use this technique to help them to overcome that uncertainty by them helping them to go into themselves to find something that is certain about them. And it's various issues. But it's very spontaneous. It's just another gift that I have, I would say.
Yeah, fascinating. Talk to me about some of the results that you've seen so far as an intuitive in that sense.
I've had people who have left the corporate world as a result of one session with me.
Wow.
But it's not been like a spur of the moment decision. It's always been something that they've been thinking about for a while. And the session that I do has just helped them, just confirmed that they're on the right track. And then I've had people who have gone off, who are already working for themselves. Like I work with a lot of coaches. And so I've had coaches come to me and they've changed their service offering so that they're doing something that is more authentic in terms of what they're offering and something unique. Because obviously there are lots of coaches around, and it's so important that we find that unique thing that's going to attract the right clients who they're supposed to serve. And I've had people who have developed healing systems as well as a result of this work. So it's always been about helping people to get on the path that they're supposed to be on.
It sounds to me like your clients are folks that are pretty much there, but they just need some help just getting across the line. And
yes.
What do you think it is that gets them stuck? Why aren't they crossing that line by themselves? And why do they need your help to get there? What do you think it is?
It is a lot of the time worthiness. I come across, and this is my experience as well, I come across people who have left the corporate world and they are then transitioning into a new role as a life coach or a healer or counselor, something along those lines. And they still don't believe that they can do the job, although they may have done a course or they may have got some experience. It's just that self-belief is not always there. And a lot of the time it's because they haven't recognized their past experience or even taken that into account as a piece of the puzzle that's helping them to become the great coach that they want to become. A lot of the time that is the case. And so it's helping them to feel worthy of their new role and to make their new role their own, which a lot of people are afraid to do.
Absolutely. It reminds me a bit of imposter syndrome in that sense, this concept of worthiness, which is fascinating there. And I love how that relates to our own self-belief. I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think that so many people experience this low sense of self-worth?
Because I don't think it's recognized, and I have to go back to the corporate world, it isn't always recognized in the corporate world. They're not always recognized for who they are. They're recognized for the job that they do. And so that's where this low sense of worth comes from, because when they've not got a job, they don't know who they are. At the core, at the soul level.
That reminds me of this concept of being and doing. I mean, doing is one thing, but actually just being is something else. And I fully get that. In the corporate world, we're recognised for our achievements, and they're often quite logical measures, I suppose, in that sense.
Yeah.
We're not recognised necessarily for our creativity and what we truly uniquely have to offer, I suppose.
Exactly.
Let's talk about numerology, because I know this is something that you're interested in and something that you practice as well.
Yeah.
I'm very new to this subject. I've known about numerology for years, but never properly understood it, and perhaps still don't. And it's only until recently when my wife Sandra introduced it to me, in the sense that she was just reading a book that happened to be talking about numerology, and she was fascinated by it. As somebody who has got a background in statistics and all that kind of stuff. How did you get into numerology?
So I used to do intuitive readings or psychic readings, let's say. And I used to receive this information and I wasn't fully comfortable with where I was getting this information from, although I had embraced my intuitive ability, but I still questioned, what is this really about? I then decided to search for a modality that would help me to understand my soul and the soul of other people. And this is where I got introduced to the numerology system that I use, because there are different systems of numerology. So this system that I use, it embodies numerology and also astrology as well. And we take the person's birth name, the name that's on the birth certificate, and from the birth certificate, it's then converted into numbers and symbols. Now, how it works is when you are born, your name is transmitted to your mum, your dad, your sister, your brother, whoever it is that comes up with your name. And it's one of those things where you'll hear them, like you've got children as well, but you know, like when your children were born and you came up with a name and it was a name that both you and your wife would have just known it was the right name. It's just that feeling, it's just the right name because it's been transmitted from the baby. And I've got an example of this as well of my own, because I've got 3 boys. And my last boy he's 10 now. But when I was pregnant with him, I had this name Daniel in my head that, you know, he was going to be called Daniel. I just loved the name Daniel. And for the whole 9 months, I was calling this child Daniel because I knew I was having a boy. And so when he was born now, he came out and they put the baby on my chest and he looked at me and it was almost as if he said, "Mummy, my name is not Daniel." And I said to his dad at the time, I said, "Could you please go and find his name? Because his name is not Daniel." I just knew that his name wasn't Daniel, you know, and this was a name that I'd loved this name.
Wow.
And so he went off, his dad went off and came back a couple of days later with this name that I'd never, ever heard before. His name is Amari. Amari. Never heard the name before in my life. But I knew that was his name.
Wow.
And we named him Amari. But that's just an example of the child transmitting the name, because it's not always the right name or, you know, the name that we want to call the child. And so when the name comes through then, so each letter of the name has a meaning and a vibration. So when we put all of those letters together, we have a whole story, a life story. So that child, when they're transmitting the name, what they're saying is they're transmitting a story that they've come into this lifetime to experience.
Okay.
And so from this life story, let's say, from your birth name, I'm able to decipher your challenges that you've come into this lifetime to experience. Your talents, abilities, and unique skills, and your goals for your soul and your soul destiny. And with this information, how I integrate it into my work then, because my thing is around career management and business planning, let's say, I use this tool to help people to understand what their strengths are, what their talents are, what their abilities, how they should harness that in order to achieve a deep sense of career satisfaction or business success.
That's amazing. That's fascinating. It's amazing what you're saying there about like the child themselves transmitting their own names. I've never thought of it like that. I mean, with our 2 sons, Lucas and Leo, certainly I think with both of them, the funny thing was we had plenty of girls' names, but we were really struggling with both boys' names. But as soon as they were born, we just landed on it. It was it was a no-brainer. You know, Lucas was absolutely Lucas and we had no other name for him. And the same with Leo. So that's fascinating to hear that. And I'm very open-minded to all of this stuff because I can imagine somebody listening to this thinking, it all sounds very sort of like, you know, spiritual and exciting and nice to think about. But I'm always surprised at how this stuff sometimes does align with who we are. So for our listener at home, I know that when we had a pre-interview chat, we talked about you doing a reading for me. So I shared with you my full birth certificate name and date of birth.
Yeah.
You've done a reading for me, which you're going to share with me now, which I'm super excited to hear, particularly because you don't really know me that well.
No, I don't.
So we can safely say that. So there may be things that you're going to reveal to me, which I can sort of like qualify or disqualify afterwards.
Yeah.
So what have you found out then? What's come to you through this process? I can't wait to find out.
So I'm going to divide this up. I'm going to do there's two parts to this reading. So I'm just going to do the first part for the purpose of this interview.
Okay.
Right. So it's divided up into three. So we've got your challenges, your talents, and your goals. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I saw when I looked into your name, and if we're looking at it from your life experience, the story that you've chosen to experience, the challenges that you have come across in your life is being able to stand in your own energy and to feel proud and accept who you are completely. Because as a child, you would have felt very different in the way amongst your family, actually, you felt a bit different because you had very different interests to your family. And you were always very intrigued by how things work and, really wanted to get out and explore, which wasn't a common thing in your family. And so you had to kind of overcome that because there might have been people around you who are thinking, oh, what is he doing? Why has he chosen to do that?
Yeah.
Do you know? And I feel for a while that you did. I can't remember, Rob, if you actually told me that you used to work in technology. Did you?
I did.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
You did. Right. Okay. Because that came up. And I couldn't remember because this is what happens as well when I start reading. I can't remember. Did you tell me that? Where am I getting that information from? So you would have been in the corporate world for a bit, working in technology, but not feeling that you were being recognized, actually, because you had certain ideas in terms of how, were you doing sales or something along that, or was it very technical? Because it felt like if it was technical, you were able to explain concepts to people who were not technical. If it was sales, then you were very good at selling technology because you just understood it.
It's fascinating you say that because I know I haven't shared this with you, absolutely.
Okay, right.
Because I would say that is probably one of the key benefits that I used to use in interviews to gain a position.
Okay.
Had this ability to turn a complex idea into a simple, understandable concept for people who needed to use technology to get wherever it was that they were going. So, I wasn't in a sales role. I was very much in an analytical role. But one of the things that definitely helped me, I suppose, to stand out from my peers in that sense was this ability to communicate technical concepts at a simple level. Right. Yeah, that was clear here. Interesting. Because you're really able to explain complex systems and ideas to others. So that came out. But what I felt is you had to leave the corporate world because although you were successful, I feel like you had so many ideas in terms of technology and what you could do with things, and that wouldn't have been valued in that setting. And that's why you had to leave. And I felt that also it was like a door was opening to other interests, because you start to question, okay, I really want to express who I am. I really want to go and do my own thing. But I don't think even that was clear when you left the corporate world in terms of what you would actually do. You had to then go on a journey yourself in order to come to that conclusion, because at the very core of you is creativity. It's like you are like a creative spark and you're here to inspire others with your creativity. And you had to really go on that journey to embrace that creative aspect of yourself. Yeah, completely right. Yeah, that's fascinating because that does absolutely resonate with my journey in the last 10 years. Yeah. Right. Because now it's like everything that you do, it has to be not only just done your way, but it has to be creative, and even the people that you collaborate with, they have to be creative. Mm-hmm. You're not going to collaborate with somebody who isn't creative in that sense. So that is one of your values. Also, you're very unconventional as well, quite open to different ways of doing things, and not just in the work realm, personally as well. So you might be open to different therapies, for instance, or, different ways of holidaying. I don't know where that's come from. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, just to share with you, my wife and I decided rather than going on a skiing holiday to go and run a chalet in the French Alps for a whole season, because we thought, well, how can we sustain ourselves for a whole winter season out there? And the obvious answer was to just go and work out there, run a chalet, which is exactly what we did.
Oh, wow.
So that's one way we've done it. We're always having that conversation. So we're very much like to the point now where rather than just having holidays, having a lifestyle with holidays, we're almost trying to see sort of how our lifestyle can be a holiday, so that we're almost kind of working on holiday all the time. So so that kind of fits very well in terms of that mindset.
So that's kind of the first part of your reading.
Interesting.
Yeah, but normally it would go on for about 90 minutes.
Okay. Which I would love to do right now, but I appreciate we are chatting about you and not me for this for the purpose of this interview. So that's very insightful. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely stuff there that you shared with me that I wouldn't have shared with you, and that does align with my journey so far. So that's fascinating to hear. So what's the second bit? I'm intrigued to know what the second bit is.
So the first part is to do with your worldly experience. So that is from the ages of 0 to 35, but it still applies, okay? And then the second part is your spiritual experience, which is from the ages of 35 and over. So it's like going into your midlife phase. That's how the reading is divided, because we have the beginning of our lives up until the midlife, and we have to transition from one phase to the other. Some people are transitioning and don't realize what's happening.
Just to tie in with that timeline, my transition, probably the significant points were between 33 and 35, which is really fascinating.
Wow. So that was dead on.
Yes. This numbers business is pretty accurate, I can see. So what's the second part then, and how does that unfold?
Do you want me to go into it? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the second part, I haven't actually looked at this, but I'm going into it now. But I can see like you've got your talents for your second phase of life is really about like you do the radio, the podcasting. It's about broadcasting and really understanding what you've been through and taking the wisdom from that to share with other people. And I think that everything that you do share, it's things that you've had to experience. Yourself. It's very kind of you are very expressive, and I would say that it's not just podcasting. There are other ways as well that is coming through here that you can work with people and inspire people, like the coaching. Are you doing coaching as well?
I have been coaching. Yeah, I've been coaching for like the last 10 years.
Wow.
I've been coaching for the last 10 years, but that coaching is now transforming in its own way, I suppose, helping people develop their own podcast strategy. I've also been coaching artists and small business owners and all that kind of thing. So what I'm learning now is that my coaching is actually becoming part of many other things rather than just solely coaching, if that makes sense.
Right. I see. Yeah, because that does make a lot of sense, because your coaching here, it is very creative. It's really supporting people to be to be creative and to express themselves. And also one of your challenges here, I've got here, it's about you've had to go into your past in order to understand your present. You've done a lot of soul searching, and that's been your challenge, is to actually go to that place.
Okay.
Of looking back, because I feel that there were certain things that, perhaps you didn't want to really accept that were happening, let's say, but you've had to really go into things in order to do this work with people, actually.
It's probably quite natural to reflect, isn't it, on your past, because that's where we get our lessons from. But it's quite funny you sort of bring that up now, coincidentally or otherwise. Right now, the floor behind me is full of papers and stuff that I found as part of a decluttering process that we're going through. But interestingly, most of what's there is from some box files I found from 20 years ago. And what's really interesting to me right now is that there has been quite a lot of reflection over the weekend as I've been sorting through this stuff and chucking most of it out, obviously, and letting go of it. But what it also did was I went through a process of sort of deep reflection on things that I'd completely forgotten about and how much I've changed since then and what I've learned since then as well. So what you're saying really ties in with that, which is fascinating. And
this is what I always find, is that when I do these readings, I'll say something and it will just spark something off in someone, because sometimes it doesn't really make any sense to me, but I'll say it anyway. but it always makes sense to the other person. So that's fantastic. You are a rock for many people, and I think that comes through in your podcasting, but it also comes through as well, according to these numbers, through your coaching as well. So really being there for other people so that they can feel that they can do the work they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that's pretty insightful. So I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but
yes, there is.
For the brevity of time, thank you for sharing that with me. Let's get back to your story and what you're doing now and how you're helping people in that sense. Why do you believe it's important that we follow our own passions and finding a life that we love?
I believe that it's important that we follow our soul, follow our heart, as it were. Because if we don't, we're just going to regret what we haven't done. There's a quote, isn't there? In the end, we only regret the chances that we didn't take. And it's so true, because regret is like, it kills you. It kills your self-esteem, kills your spirit. And so I think that if you don't follow your heart, you don't follow your soul, then you're just going to be very frustrated. And there was also a book that was written a few years ago by a lady called Bronnie Ware, who was an Australian nurse. And she worked in palliative care for like the last 12 weeks of people's lives, of the patients' lives. And she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of Dying. And in the top 5 was, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. That was the top regret.
I mean, if nothing else, that does underline the importance of authentic living in that sense. And that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, what is the risk of not fulfilling our own authentic lives in that sense?
It's our life. We'll just lose our life. We'll lose the whole point of life. We'll miss the point of life. And I feel that when we don't follow our soul, we can become quite depressed, and all sorts of issues arise from that depression. So I would encourage people to, if they've got that call, if they've got that urge to do something, it's often their soul wanting to be expressed. And so it's about answering that call and just having the courage to know that this journey will take you to a place greater than you've ever imagined.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think that some of the experiences that I've had over the last few years have been beyond my wildest dreams in that sense. And I think that has come from a place of trying to live more authentically to who I truly am. What have been some of the big lessons and insights that you've gained in your life so far, through your life's journey so far? What ideas and suggestions would you give perhaps to your younger self if you could meet that person right now?
I would always say, believe in yourself. That is what I would have said to my younger self. Believe in yourself and trust your intuition, because it's always right. That's what I would have, definitely said.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What would you say to somebody? I mean, in my experience, I always follow my intuition, and it doesn't always lead to a successful outcome, but there's definitely been a lesson in there. I mean, what would you say to somebody in that sense in terms of following your intuition? Well,
that's it. There is always a process, because intuition will lead you to wisdom. And it's like intuition, you'll do something and you might come across a bump in the road, let's say. But as you say, with that bump, you're going to learn something. And that's what your soul wants you to learn. So it will take you down paths whereby you'll have to learn lessons. But at the end of the day, you're going to be a wise person for doing that.
So this is about getting to know ourselves better in that sense.
Yeah, and not being afraid of that.
Wow, there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but we've covered a lot already today. Before we wrap up, in the context of everything that we've spoken about today, is there anything you'd like to add?
I just want to tell your listeners, anyone who is out there and just afraid of stepping out and being who they are, I just want to say that your superpower is your uniqueness. That is the underlying theme of your potential success or your deep sense of satisfaction.
Great. So before we wrap up then, I'd love to ask you just some final closing questions, if I may. What's inspired you recently, Lorraine?
My children are constantly inspiring me. I've got 3 boys and they're all very creative. One of them, I suppose, the most recent spark of inspiration was this weekend. I had my middle boy. He loves painting and drawing, and he just decided out of the blue to create Christmas cards that he himself had had thought of. But it was just inspiring for me, because I just think that how many of us kind of want to do something and we don't do it because of fear of whatever our fears are, fear of, looking stupid or whatever, I don't know. But it's like my son just literally said, I'm going to do this, and just did it. Yeah. And then within an hour, he had produced a whole range of cards, so, which he's going to give to his friends. Yeah, I get constantly inspired by my boys.
Yeah, children are super inspiring. And I too share that with you, this bold and courageous, don't care attitude that they have. They're just like, I want to make that thing. I mean, what fascinates me about my own children is that they'll create these things and then just throw them away or tear them up, or, it's like, I think there's a lot to be said about creating something and then having no attachment to it.
That's right. Yeah. Letting go.
Exactly. Amazing.
Definitely.
Also, what are you grateful for today?
I am grateful for my life. I'm grateful for everything that I've been through, all of my challenges. That's what I'm grateful for, because it's made me the person that I am today.
What a wonderful thing to be grateful for too. Well, I'm certainly grateful for your time today, Lorraine.
Thank you.
What's next for you? You've got a new website. What's next for you?
Well, I'm going to be getting out there some more, and I'm actually writing a book.
Wow.
And so I'm hoping to get that published next year, 2017. So, there's a lot of things kind of in line with that I'm going to be doing around the book and taking my work to another level.
Great. And can you give us a sneak peek, a little idea about what your book's going to be about?
It is about the challenges that we go through and how we can overcome them. And it's seeing them in a completely different way. So I use a lot of metaphors. So I've used metaphors to describe common challenges that we all experience. And I've given tools in terms of how we can overcome them. And the whole point of it is that we become more of our true selves. We embrace our uniqueness. We see how unique we are.
So for anyone interested in the book, and for our listener who would love, I'm sure, to find out more about you and your work, where can we find you, Lorraine?
Okay, if you go to www.lifestrategist.co.uk.
Fabulous. So that's www.lifestrategist.co.uk.
That's right.
Lorraine, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Nothing beats the stories and advice of an expert to help you raise your creative game. I would love to know what you thought about today's episode, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes, where you can rate and review the show. If you like this episode, I invite you to share it on Facebook or Twitter with the one person you know who will benefit from the wisdom shared here today. You can find the show notes on inspirationalcreatives.com/podcast. If you have a burning question or a great idea for a guest, head on over to inspirationalcreatives.com/contact, where you can connect with me there.